Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Authors to Know and Their Books to Read. My name is Martinique Brown, and I'm so excited that you have decided to tune into the show today. Today, I actually have author Arlene J Ramsey on the show, and she's going to be talking about her book, The Eclipse of School Torment, a guide to end school bullying. If this is your first time ever tuning into the show, thank you so much. What I need you to do is go ahead and share this video now so that more people will know about Arlene and her book and her other book that we'll be discussing on the show later on as well. All of our contact information is in the description box. If you truly enjoy these shows that I produce and host, I would love for you to go ahead and visit my GoFundMe page as well as my PayPal link so that you can give a financial gift in any amount. And that would just be such a blessing to me. As well, I would love for you to also subscribe to my YouTube channel, and that link is in the description box as well. Arlene, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, everybody.
You are welcome. So can you just tell our viewers just a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So my name, of course, is Arlene J Ramsey, born and raised in Newark, New Jersey. I published my first book in 2007 titled Newark's Armadillo. That was right after I figured out what my purpose was, and it was a catalyst to relieving myself of trauma that I've been through. And I've discussed the bullying that I've went through in that book, and I called it Torment. So okay. Go figure, back then in 2007, they haven't coined the phrase bullying, right? So I didn't know what to call it, but I identified it with how I felt that it was and what it actually was. Yeah. So fast forwarding a couple of years, well, let me not go fast forward. I was in the international business where I've dealt with international freight containers, was a U.S. customs broker, and I decided to leave my career to get into the community after I figured out what my purpose was. And all of this things right after I published my first book. I've done so much in the community, from feeding the homeless to giving seminars on bullying, women empowerment seminars, as well as community service. This topic of bullying is very near dear to my heart because I know what it feels like. I've seen it. I've had a friend that has been bullied, and I don't have any children, but I feel for these children who are dealing with bullying, who are either, they're suffering in silence and they're killing themselves, or children who are killing other children. It's the same coin, just as opposite side of the coin. And both children, the onlookers, parents, school administration need help with this topic. Just when was it? Yesterday? I think it was yesterday. I saw someone forward a link where 80 children watched an African-American boy get stabbed to death by a Caucasian boy. And no one intervened to save him. They watched and they videoed and they recorded it. And we're like emotionally detached. We're desensitized to even watching this stuff. And, we have to pull back. We have to get some more compassion, some more understanding, a bit more balance to human behavior and just understanding.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to give a shout out to Mia. She's actually watching the show. Thank you so much, Mia. If you could make sure you go ahead and share this video now so more people will know about this important topic. So I know that you actually mentioned that you feel that as a society, we need to have more compassion. How do we even start that path to getting that back?
Such a great question. We start that path by being open to these discussions, right? What I've realized, and I hope I'm not speaking too low, so please remind me if my voice goes down.
You are keep it like that.
Okay. So what I've realized is that we're also in this rat race. We're all trying to make it to the top, and we're all dealing with the pressures of society. And in dealing with that, it's like we we think as a people we don't have enough time to deal with anything that's outside of what we're already dealing with.
Yeah.
So that automatically desensitizes us because we're in survival mode. We're thinking about what's our next move while some of us are still drowning.
Mm-hmm.
That we can't see the person who's actually, their head is in the water and they need help because some of us are drowning. So we're trying to save ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is just not understanding human behavior, not knowing themselves or even understanding what they're witnessing as far as character is concerned. You know, when we talk about bullying, it is discussed as, you know, they're so bad or just children will be kids. Kids will be kids or that's a bad thing. How about we look at it from a psychological perspective as, do these children really know the effects of their actions? And why are they behaving this way?
Mm-hmm.
Understand what I'm saying? You know, you have some children who comes from abusive households, right? Now you asked the question, how do we get there? So let me not fast forward and go so fast. So in getting there, it's remembering that the world doesn't consist of just us trying to survive. There are people that need our help, and there are people that are looking for us to help them if they can't help themselves. And those are our children who are going through this. So we need a lot of adults to just take the time to sit back and ask themselves what is really important here, you know, and is paying the bills, working a rat race to pay the bills, just to pay the bills or just to keep up with the Joneses. Is that what all life is about?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we are the leaders and we have to take care of the children that cannot take care of themselves. I look at myself as a voice for children who can't take care of themselves, and I don't have any children. So we always have to remember that there are little ones and even other adults that need help. Everybody's trying to figure life out. No one was born with a book, you know, of some sort. So we're all trying to figure it out. So those of us who know a little bit more, we should hold ourselves responsible to extending back and teaching so that others can pull themselves up out of the dirt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, and I actually, I'm glad that you brought up the incident of the young man that was stabbed because I read that article, and the past couple of days I've been with my nieces and nephews, and that's not an everyday thing for me. Like, because we live about an hour away, and so especially during the week when they're getting ready for school and everything, then like I don't need to go up there and see them and stuff. So I was actually babysitting my nieces and nephews. So I had my two nephews in the car, and so a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. And because I don't have like these deep discussions with them all the time, like whenever I had that opportunity, I try to have like these solid conversations with them. And so I asked my nephews, I said, you know, I read an article where, you know, a young man was stabbed to death. He was, you know, jumped, and just the onlookers just recorded it. And I asked him, I said, what would y'all do, you know, in that situation? And so my 16-year-old nephew was just saying, he said, well, I would go get help, you know, for the boy. And I said, okay. I said, and I told him, I said, well, you know, it's pretty difficult for me to see somebody get beat up like that. And so his rationale was, well, I can watch when it's a fair fight. I can watch when it's just two people fighting, but he would go seek help when it's a group of people beating somebody up. But what I've learned about like that mob mentality, when a group of people begins to feel a certain way about something, and they take on that, everybody takes on that emotion of like get him, or you know, they may be fearful, but they still don't do anything about it.
I'm so happy that you said that. That comes from people are easily manipulated by emotion, right? If you notice, someone can just come in here and say something with a lot of passion or emotion, and the majority of people won't say, wait a minute, let me go and do research and find out if this is true. they automatically react. So it's also a matter of being taught how not to react just based off of what people are telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Find out if these things are true, because you don't want to be manipulated by your emotion, because that's who we are. We are emotional creatures as well as we're rational and logical creatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be incited to move dependent on whoever's the person who's perpetrating or trying to get people to move a certain way. So whatever that person's energy is, everyone else is going to reflect that energy if they don't know how to say to self, wait a minute, let me find out what's true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that we need adults to do. But what's so challenging about that is that you find a lot of adults do the same thing. So with bullying, and this is why I found it very important to write this book, because a lot of adults are easily manipulated by emotional snippets as well. And they react on it and they go on and on and on and on. There's no off switch. They don't know when to stop. Let me just use Chrisette Michele for an example. Everybody harped on Chrisette Michele for performing at the inauguration when President Trump got elected, right? Mm-hmm. They forgot that Travis Green, which was a gospel singer, performed with her. They automatically dismissed him, and they harped on her so much where it affected her career. But when people post things about her today, some people are still hateful at the fact that she performed. And this is how many years after the fact. So it's, you'd have to say to adults, when do you think enough is enough? When do you think, how do you think that you're responsible for punishing a person repeatedly and regurgitating this type of information repeatedly? So when adults do it, how do we expect children to know any better? And again, this is why this topic is very important, and I feel like we're not handling it properly. And the reason is because you cannot solve a problem with the same mind that's creating it. And this is not to point fingers, but this is to say this is very serious. And if we don't stop and take a look at what we're doing and involving ourselves in, we're going to fail. We're going to fail horribly, and we're seeing that today. A lot of things. Another thing is that some people are afraid to step up because, again, society has shown us that whoever steps up as Superman or Superwoman, they get attacked. And usually the person that has the courage to step up, it's not much of them. They're spaced out. So out of 100 people, you might have 1 or 2 people that have the courage to step up. But, 3 people out of to 97, that's a lose-lose situation unless you have some great tactics to calm down the crowd, right? So this is also a matter of children and adults not knowing the proper de-escalation skills and survival skills. So they're not really, how can I say, strategic in how we're handling crowds of people and situations. So now people who want to help, they feel paralyzed. What can they do? Because now they don't want to go and help and then become a victim as well. So I want to say that those are some skill sets that I've learned because I grew up in what people would call the hood, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I've been a victim of bullying, but there was a lot of violence in my neighborhood and near and around me that I had to deal with and my family had to deal with. So there was a lot of things that I had to learn how to survive and pay attention to energy, pay attention to how people are moving, pay attention to the results of each situation. So I paid so much attention to everything. Everything was a lesson to me. And then I took that and applied it to how I'm dealing with people. So now if I'm watching a child in that situation, if I was that boy in that situation, I would have been one to step in to break up that fight. He would not have died. But then I know how to take care of myself. You know what I mean? So all of those things are very important. We have to look at survival skills, and we should be sending our children over to camp to learn these things. Because the more we learn survival skills, or we're put in leadership positions and we volunteer in the community, the more we'll build better skill sets on how to protect people when they're in circumstances like that.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that we have to understand is we've heard many adults say, oh, what do you know about problems? Until you're grown and paying bills, you don't know anything about problems. But I had to remember when I was a child how my problems felt to me as a child and the problems that I have now as an adult, it felt the same.
Yeah.
It's just on a smaller scale, so we should not compare a child's problem to an adult's problem because it's not going to be the same. But the child feels the same level of anxiety in their problem as the adult feels in their problem. So that's the thing we have to look at. We have to look at the circumstances and the level of anxiety and pressure it is putting onto our children. And if they're dealing with that all the time, they automatically go into what I forgot the psychologist, but you know the thing where they call fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
They're consistently in fight or flight mode because their lives are feeling like their lives are in danger.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So, I mean, I know that you said that you experienced this growing up. Um, do you think that us as adults rationalize this as, oh, well, everybody's bullied. I was bullied when I was growing up. So, you know, they'll get stronger from it.
I think they do, and I think people dismiss or like to forget the harsher acts of bullying because everybody goes through it, right? So we don't want to create, a society that's very sensitive as well. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have, children do those things, but when you see it happens for a while and it's stopped and it's done and over with, I don't really consider that as bullying. Right now, I consider that as kids, they're testing their strength, they're testing whatever skill sets they think they have, and it's done and over with. It's bullying when it continues, it's consistent, and it doesn't stop. You know, and this is mobs of people or different people picking on the same person. And this child will go to school for the entire school year and never get a break. That's bullying.
Okay. I'm
Because
glad
they
that you
never got a
actually
break.
defined it. I'm glad you defined it, for us. So, can you actually walk us through your book?
Sure. Okay. So I like to start here on page 34. Well, let me just tell you what the table of contents are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So chapter 1, it's let's talk statistics, facts, and true examples. So in that chapter, I thought to bring up statistics because, again, I think that we don't take this serious enough. But if we have a book where everything is written on just exactly how bullying, who's affected by bullying and why, and what happens, I think we're going to start to take things more seriously than seeing an article here, there, and the third, and we don't see all of the cases of bullying. You understand? Because the United States is huge. So we're going to see the cases that's near to us. What
Mm-hmm.
about the Western states that we don't get news from that often? You know, so when I Google these things up and I went into doing research, I was flabbergasted by just how broad this is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going on in just about every state in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's very traumatizing and devastating. Okay, so the second chapter, let's talk effects of torment, aka bullying. I found it very, very important to list the effects because people don't understand that the effects of bullying don't just affect the child. It also affects us well into our adult years
Mm-hmm.
because there are some skill sets that we have to learn um, in order to thrive and be successful as adults, and such as social and emotional skills. That,
Mm-hmm.
you know, those are, let's use one as an example, being able to recognize live cues or social cues. That means if someone wants to engage in a friendly conversation with me, they may not verbally tell me. These are all be nonverbal communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that the child who has been bullied for many parts of years in their life, they will not be able to recognize those social cues because they've been so busy protecting themselves from attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a skill set that has never developed in that time. So now when they're an adult, they may seem awkward because they really cannot pick up on social cues.
Mm-hmm.
So now that's something that they would have to teach themselves if they know about it. Now, lucky for me, this I'm self-taught in this realm of psychology. So lucky for me, I taught myself that, and I've learned how to recognize these things. But what about the average person, or just the person who doesn't have the gift of psychology, or who wasn't into psychology? How will they know that that's a skill set that they needed to develop that's not developed?
Mm-hmm.
Study shows that children who were bullied become adults that are either not successful or find it very hard to be successful. Because
Mm-hmm.
as you know, a lot of success is based on people who are able to like you. You know what I mean? If you fit in with this group, if you can, get along well with this group, if this energy meshes well with this group, how do you communicate with this group? And none of those skill sets were built.
Mm-hmm.
It's like playing on any team, a football team or a basketball team. In order for a team to be great, they had to have the safe spaces of these players learning each other and picking up on each other's cues in order to be a great team. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with children, and it affects us when we become adults. I'm a witness of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it was very important for me to list the effects of torment. Chapter 3, I go into let's talk character and personality disorders. Again, this is not about pointing the fingers about how bad bullying is. It's about actually getting into why this is happening. So personality disorders, there are some people who are naturally born emotionally detached
Mm-hmm.
or unable to connect with emotion. So if they cannot connect with their own emotion, how can they connect with someone else's emotion, or how can they determine whether something's bad or not, or emotionally bad or not for a human being if they're not connected with their emotion? So when we look at children or people do things and you're like, wow, you seems like you're heartless. You're heartless. How could you do something like that? Before we just say, how could you do something like that and label them as heartless or bad, it's about digging into finding out why they're not, like why they cannot feel, or why couldn't they connect with the emotion that is connected to that act.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll learn that some children are born that way, and they would have to develop emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, and that will be something that has to be worked on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important. Um, yeah, the other thing is what is it? Conduct disorders, right? You have children who again have narcissistic ways, or you know selfish ways, and this is not a negative thing. This is just some things I'm throwing out there, and it's part of their character construct. So when they're children, it is called a conduct disorder when they
Mm-hmm.
behave in this way. But when it's not handled right or leveled or balanced out as children, when they become adults, it's you're now called a sociopath or a psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we all know that a sociopathic adult or a psychopathic adult is one we really don't want to deal with, right?
Right.
And when we see an adult like that, if we can label them like that, then we should be able to connect with the fact that when they were children, chances are they had some type of conduct disorder, personality disorder, and no one, knew how to level that out or balance that out. So now it was left to brew, and now we have an adult that's out here treating other adults in, unimaginable ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I mentioned, I listed that. Um, Chapter 4, let's talk cause of torment. Okay, that's very important because a lot of people, things we think people are bullied for or tormented for, sometimes is not the real issue. You know, um, we have to look into people and their differences. So let me give you an example. There are, group children who are bullied because of they may have some type of deformities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this book, I tell parents, I know you love your children, but we're doing our children a disservice if we cannot acknowledge the fact that they were born with certain defects, and not empower them and show them where their greatnesses are. Because now when that child goes to school thinking nothing's wrong with them and other children are attacking them, they may not have, they don't have the right or the proper self-advocacy, to where to fend that off. So in this book, I want parents to saying to yourself, it's okay. You know, you're not at fault here. This is what happened. Your child was born this way. Now, what are we going to do to empower our child?
Mm-hmm.
Let them know that they're great in other areas, and we all have flaws. So it was important to list that. I also listed some other things, whereas you have children that might be a little popular in school, and a child may want that other child's popularity.
Mm-hmm.
They might want that other child's shine. So they're going to create this hysteria to take the focus off of the child that may be a popular in school, to assassinate that person's character to garner all the attention. Okay, you have some children who came from abusive households,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now the child that came from an abusive household can become the tormentor, or they can become the tormented, all depending on the person that chose to target them. Okay. The other thing I talked about, which was it? Okay, chapter 5. I go into listing school shootings and bullycide and tragedies. Very important for me to list that. You'll be surprised that when I looked up information on school shootings, it was so easy for me to find a list of shootings in all the states throughout the United States, right?
Yeah.
But when I go to look up bullycide, it was so hard for me to find. I had to do extra work.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies the problem, because they want to label the children that come to school and shoot up the kids in school as the bad guy. You're terrible, something's wrong with you. But they didn't list bullycide as it's not in your face, because they don't want to deal with the fact that they're not handling the situation properly, and they don't want to see people to know how much children are actually killing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I question, why hide one and not hide the other? You understand? And it's all about people labeling people, wanting somebody to look like the bad guy or wanting somebody to take the blame, when the reality is some people are, like I said again, are born a certain way, or life circumstances create them to be this way, and this is how they chose to respond in life.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? Some people, the children that are targeted, could have come from the same background, an abusive background, but now this child has no self-advocacy because they feel like a victim, and they think that all they can be is a victim. Whereas the child who chooses to bully, who came from that background, may feel like, this should have never happened to me. I should never be sexually abused. I should never have to deal with being abused at home. So I'm going to go to school and abuse somebody at school.
Mm-hmm.
So they could come from the same background. It's just that one chooses to, feel like the victim. The other one wants to victimize.
Yeah.
And in both cases, both children on opposite side of the coins need help to balance out their characteristics. Another thing that I list in the book is allowing your children to community service, get involved with the community, especially children who, not especially, both. So for the children who don't have healthy self-esteem or healthy self-advocacy, they will learn that in these types of programs, right? And for the children who are targeting other children to bully other children, they will learn how to become better leaders, and they'll learn to shift that energy to doing positive things, opposed to targeting people to creating a negative response. Because the truth of the matter is, if all they want or all they're looking for is some type of attention or notoriety, they can get it in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They don't have to victimize somebody else or assassinate someone else and cause a series of negative reactions to get that, because now you're harming someone else's life, and many people's lives, right? In chapter 6, I label it, Let's Talk cultural humility. That's another reason why people are bullied when they're, bicultural, or they just come from another culture. People don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And in not understanding that culture and how people do things, the food they eat, how the clothes they wear, their body language, how they approach life itself, that can cause them to become targets for bullying.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this book, I make it very clear that, people, we're all different, and we're all human beings, and no one should be targeted just because they're different. And not understanding their differences in some cases may just annoy certain people.
Yeah.
We all have our personalities, right? So if you're annoyed with certain things, and you're talking about a child who doesn't know proper rationale yet, that may be their first response to do something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of also talking to the child, to letting them know it's okay to be annoyed, but it's not okay to target and attack someone else
Mm-hmm.
because of their differences. You understand? So I see this as a moment to teach the world, a moment to teach the world, because I see that there's so much that we don't know. And a lot of this behavior is coming from a lot of ignorance, and a lot of us not being able to help the situation is also coming from ignorance, and,
Mm-hmm.
and unable to see things for exactly what they are.
Yeah.
All right. The last chapter, I label it, let's try empathy, because we don't have enough of it. As I mentioned before, we're socially, emotionally detached.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time that we start to reteach ourselves how to have feelings for other people, how to
Mm-hmm.
care for other people. Even if something doesn't go right for you in life, it's okay. No one needs to be attacked for it. It's okay. You dust yourself off and you try again.
Definitely. So let me ask you something. Do you know if teachers have to go through some type of training for bullying?
Yeah, what do they call it? Bullying, intimidation, and something. Harassment, it's HBI or HIB, right?
Mm-hmm.
Harassment, intimidation, and bullying. I'm not quite sure how effective those programs are, because I haven't sat in one.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what I'm going to tell you. Um, from the results that I've been seeing and still seeing, I don't think that those programs are effective, or maybe the teachers are not understanding something properly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the disconnect is, but still to this day, when children are dealing with bullying, teachers don't have much to say. And a lot of parents, when they come to the school, they're getting pushed aside. They're not being taken seriously. And they're saying that this teaches character. And I asked, in the book, I asked, if it teaches character, whose character? And no, it builds character is what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I questioned whose character is it building, and what type of character are we building?
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, Also in the book, I talk about per my research, they tell the child that's being bullied, do not fight back, or, just walk away, because 9 times out of 10, the bully is going to get angrier and things could get worse. And I disagree with that, because now you're telling a child that is being bullied that there's no way that they can stand up for themselves, because trying to stand up to the bully is only going to make the bully get even more infuriated, and it's going to cause the friends that you have to leave your side. And I've seen that happen to me as a child. When
Mm-hmm.
I started fighting back, the friends, that they didn't want to have anything to do with it, so they stopped talking to me, and it's okay. So what I question, or I challenge in that book is, I said, are you saying that every other child's life is more important than the child that's being bullied?
Mm-hmm.
You're basically teaching the child that there's nothing that they can do to protect themselves from this situation. And the only thing they can do is walk away and tell a teacher that's not going to do anything to help them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have to get out of this. We lean too much. We go from one extreme to the other. Now, I'm 42. In my day, we fought.
Yeah.
Okay, there was no way. When I dealt with bullying, but there was no way you were going to beat me. You know, and I'm proud to say that because I refuse to get treated like that. Come
Mm-hmm.
home with a broken black eye, broken nose, broken head. That's just not happening. It's
Mm-hmm.
not happening. You know, and I get it. We've gotten better and want to communicate our issues more, and we're not advocating for fighting. And I tell you, fighting should not be our first resolve.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're, however you advocate for yourself, if it's not working, then you may have to go to that resolve to stop this from happening. Because we have seen time and time again where it ends up bad for the child that has been targeted. And we can't continue to teach children that there's nothing they can do to save themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's causing these children to take their lives because they don't have the proper tools. They don't know how to do it. And the adults they run to is not helping them. So who's going to help me? And they see this clear as day that the attackers are not stopping. So what you're also teaching the attackers is that it's okay for them to do that because they watch a system not stop them from behaving that way.
Mm-hmm.
So now what people have to tell themselves is even if a child says to themselves they think what they're doing is wrong, they're also being confused by a system that's not challenging them.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're struggling with their principles. I think I'm doing wrong, and I think I shouldn't be doing this, but I want to know why aren't they stopping me? And a lot of times the system is more harsh on the child that's targeted. They would say that this child may have done something wrong. Why are you the target? Why are they picking on you?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's another thing that we have to learn how to, we have to look at things from a more complex lens or
Mm-hmm.
perspectives. You know, we leave too much room for people to play in our ignorance and revel in devious behavior
Mm-hmm.
because these same children are listening to teachers tell the child that's getting bullied, why is it you? Why are they only picking on you? And that the attackers picking up cues. They're learning how to be better attackers. They're learning that the system is not going to stop this from happening. They're learning that the system is going to think that the person that's being attacked is the wrong one. So they're
Mm-hmm.
also learning that it's very easy for them to get away with that behavior. And that's just the United States of America. We
Mm-hmm.
teach imbalance way too often, way too often. You know, you would have a teacher that would tell you to control your temper when you get upset. You know, let me use me as an example. I've been told several times to control my temper, but no one tells the child to, control your antagonism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you understand what I'm saying? And to be a relentless antagonist is not healthy for no community. You know, and
Yeah.
that's a character trait that needs to be balanced out. But I have yet to hear an adult tell a child that,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
they don't learn when to stop. And you create a system of, well, if you're attacked, then maybe you deserve to be attacked, or the system of some have to fall by the way. In nature, the animals that are weak, I don't know if you watch nature, but often if a cheetah, I don't care what the animal is, if they gave birth and a child came out defective, they would leave that one child that's weak
Mm-hmm.
because they know that that child cannot survive in the wild. So they
Right.
won't take that child along, and they'll take all the other babies. And I find that human beings are doing that when it comes to bullying. The child that has been targeted to the to these relentless points are looked at as the weak ones.
Mm-hmm.
Now they say bullying will build character, but we have seen years after years. This has been going on for so long, and we haven't seen a shift in the paradigm, and it hasn't taught the child that has been bullied how to be better advocates for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because those children just need help. They need better tools. Somebody to just give them tools. That's it.
Definitely. So I know that you actually, with your other book, Newark's armadillo. I love
Yes,
that word. But
thank you.
with that book, you said that you actually talk about some of the bullying that you experienced in that. How did writing that book help you in your healing process?
Great question. So it helped in my healing process. I've also dealt with different various forms of abuse at home.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for me to write that book in its truest form and be as authentic as I can be, I had to go back in my memory and had to go back in self and go back to the things I used to think and how I used to feel. And
Mm-hmm.
that book, I tell you, was a tearjerker for me. There were times where I cried and I couldn't write. You know, at one point I couldn't write for I think 6 months. I would
Wow.
cry every time I tried to go back to writing. I would just break down and cry. So it healed me because it brought me to healing and remembering that little girl that went through all of that. Because what happens is when we go through trauma, uh, God does something where God protects children. We don't remember all the intricate details of things that happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
It gets mind dumped somewhere and we continue to grow and do things as an adult. But what happens is psychologically, these things are in our head and we're reacting based off of our experiences and we don't even realize that. So what this book has done for me was pay attention to how I've been reacting and responding as an adult, and it was directly connected to all the things that I went through that I didn't realize I was still holding on to. And
Mm-hmm.
every person that has gone through trauma is holding on to it until they go back as an adult and face everything that they've been through as an adult, to face what that child, the little them, has been through. And they
Mm-hmm.
have to purge themselves of that. It's going to take a lot of crying. You know, it's going to take some people nearly breaking down and
Yeah.
having to build themselves back up. But once they do, they're going to be very powerful. Nothing can break them. Nothing
Can
can
you
break them.
can you talk to our viewers just about um, possibly putting their child through counseling and how that is something that's healthy and okay to do?
Yes. Well, let me first say I'm an advocate of it because I've been to counseling, right? I've been to counseling for 6 months, and it
Mm-hmm.
has helped me tremendously. That led to the publishing of my book. So I'll say this to say, putting your children to counseling can help because parents, we don't have all of the answers,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And when you see that your children are going through these things and you yourself don't know what to tell your child to help them, you're going to need outside help. You know, remember that saying, it takes a village to raise a child.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need that because, and here's why I'm saying you're going to need it. You want your child to win. You don't want them to continue to be victimized in this type of cycle. So you want to provide them with the best tools that's out so that they can survive in this world and thrive in this world. Um, it's going to help them heal of all the, you know, the pain that they've been going through, the loneliness that they've been dealing with, the misunderstanding that they've been dealing with, things that you may not be able to help them with because you may be caught up in your own life at times, you know. So we always have to think, put our egos to the side, you know, and that's a very hard thing to say because a lot of parents, they love their children, you know, and it's like, you know, back off. I don't need anyone else to help me. I got this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I want you to say that, you know, that may be doing your child more harm than good. You should tell yourself this: if you don't know what to tell your child to help them in these circumstances, that should be the indicator that you need to send your child to counseling, even if you sit in with your children and learn some tips, you know, because it's
Yeah.
also about learning. So then, you know, if you have another child, now you know what to do with your other child, and you may not need to go to counseling with them. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But it's about learning to becoming better.
Yeah.
I've listed some two books here. What page is it on? I forgot her name. 34.
Well, that's why they
Um,
have to buy the book, Arlene. You know, they have to buy the book so that they can see. what those what those other two books
Okay.
are.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yes, yes. So if you guys are interested in purchasing Arlene's book, make sure you visit the description box because you can actually purchase her books on Amazon.com as well as AuthorHouse.com as well. Can you tell our viewers just a little bit about your business, Everyone Let's Talk, and the services
Okay.
that you offer?
Okay, great. So my book, Everyone Let's Talk, not my book. My business
That's
is
the third book.
it's based upon many of the things that we're talking about and what goes on in our communities. And I decided to call it Everyone Let's Talk because I would like everyone to be interactive and chime in and let people know what's going on with them and what has been going on with them so that they can heal. There's a thing Jay-Z said in one of his songs, you can't heal what you don't reveal.
Mm-hmm.
So my business is all tailored around getting people to reveal certain things about them so that they can understand why they are reactive opposed to proactive in nature. Um, so I run a self-wealth program. I call it self-wealth, which means having a wealth of information of self.
Oh,
It's a
that's good.
spiritually based program, although I don't use the word spiritually based because some people might shut down, like some people might shut down when you start talking about God and Jesus. So I tried to make it as universal as possible because I want people to be as receptive as possible because I want to be able to be as effective as possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's based off of three pillars. That's self-awareness, self-enlightenment, and self-empowerment. Okay, so self-awareness is just the beginning. It's becoming aware of self because a lot of us don't realize how unaware of our energy and how unaware we are of self. Okay, and the more we become aware of self, the more we actually become aware of others. We can see others for who they are. Now, why this is important is many times people are upset with people over misunderstandings that were never discussed, meaning there was never a conversation. You saw someone's face expressions and you took it the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that person was just having a self-talk like, oh my God, I got to wash clothes when I get home. Oh my God, my kid got suspended from school. So
Yeah.
they're making all these funny faces, but they got all these other things going on. And then you have someone over there like, oh, who does she think she is? And who he think, So
Uh-huh.
we have all of these emotions and we tell ourselves these stories based off of people's nonverbal communication that had nothing to do with them because people are
Mm-hmm.
just living their lives and they're going through struggles or uncertainties, and all those things cause them that just have these expressions and
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
realize what they look like. So that's the awareness part, which is very important because the more they understand that, like I said again, the more they understand other people and the more they understand like, wow, I don't have to react so fast for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the self-awareness is like the eye opener. It's like, oh my God, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then, pulling out different traumas and that sort of thing, getting them, comfortable to have these conversations is very important so they understand just how they are affected when they think they're not. The next pillar, self-enlightenment, is after awareness. Now, what do we do with this? Because awareness is not really powerful. It's just that you see it. So now how do you become enlightened by it? How does my energy work? How does someone else's energy work? Like the saying, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Some people think it's for every action, there's a reaction
Mm-hmm.
because they're still reactive, right? But it's for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And then there's also a response. And
Mm-hmm.
in response, we don't have to respond at all. We can just watch, observe, right? So we want people to become enlightened about themselves and others and what's going on around them so they can get a better understanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the self-empowerment, which is the last pillar, is now we learned how to put all these components together. We deprogrammed ourselves from any trauma. We put ourselves back together. We learned what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are. We strengthened some weaknesses and we put ourselves back together And now we're powerful people. Nobody can stop us. I don't have to react. I don't have to care if someone doesn't like me. It doesn't change what I'm going to do. I don't have to care if someone doesn't want to work with me because I can just go off to the side and do my own thing. I need people to get to that perspective, because when they see life that way, then they don't have to be so violent and treacherous towards others. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, fine, I can, go off and do my own thing. Learning what your strengths are, and how powerful you are puts you in a position where you understand you don't need anybody. No, don't quote me as just saying you don't need anybody, because we all need someone and we can't do it alone. But the challenge with people who don't know better is that they're clinging to people that's not necessarily healthy for them. And then they're not healthy for the people they're clinging to, because they don't really know themselves or the other people.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, when you become empowered, you select who you want in your life. So that you deviate and you remove yourself away from all the drama and all the woes of the world,
Yeah.
because you see it. So now it's like, okay, I'm a step back and I can be friends with so and so, because
Mm-hmm.
you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Opposed to just clinging to people that's just so unhealthy, and you're unhealthy, and it's just like watching a soap opera.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We want to get to the point where we move past all of that.
Definitely. So now, are those actually just offered in Newark, or do you offer like those one-on-one conversations, those everyone let's talk conversations virtually?
That's a good question. So I'm working on opening these conversations virtually. But
Okay.
at first it was just in Newark. I ran the programs at halfway homes and
Oh,
at drug
wow.
and alcohol treatment centers, right? So I'm gearing myself up to take it to the next level.
That's good.
Um, yeah, because people all over the world, and especially in our urban communities, need this information. Like Chicago needs it, you know,
Hmm.
Detroit, Philadelphia. We need it. Our people need it.
Definitely. So now, do you ever go, like, are you open to coming to other like events to for speaking engagements?
Yes, I certainly am. Yes, I
Okay,
am.
that's good. That's good. So if you guys are interested in having Arlene come and speak at one of your events, make sure you visit the description box because it actually has her email address listed there. Arlene, I just thank you so much for really just caring about our kids as well as who we actually become. You know, once we get older. Thank you for just writing um, your book, The Eclipse of School Torment, A Guide to End School Bullying, and really just um, putting your own life story out there so that we can learn how to just be a better community and just really just learn how to begin to love ourselves so that we can treat other individuals with respect.
Right.
So I
That's right.
truly, yeah, I truly appreciate you for just being on the show. And I thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to watch another episode of Authors to Know and Their Books to Read. I hope you guys have a great night, and we will talk to you all later. Bye bye.
Bye.